Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. As always, this is your host, Coach Brad Wilson, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, and I am joined with my co-host, Jon. Jon, what up, sir?
How's it going? We got some hands from the recent Phil Ivey, Tom Dwan high stakes stream from Hustler Casino Live this weekend, and I just picked out. Yeah, I mean, I watched the whole thing, like both episodes, and I just picked out like two big pots that I thought had some interesting hands that would probably generate some discussion from the both of us.
Yeah, I mean, we can't forget G-Man and Berkey
right.
and Gall.
Yeah,
those guys. And the Mixer. Look, we got the Mixer on the screen right there with his vape pen ready to make some.
This guy, Mickey, was incredible, man. I mean, like, people talk about how exciting like G-Man and like Ivey and Durr and like whatever having those guys on stream are, but like, I think Mickey is just like 1,000 times more entertaining and would make like any stream 1,000 times more entertaining than any of those pros.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Mixer didn't care, does not care at all. Let's just put some money in the pot. Yeah. Definitely good wild card that made the whole thing fun. I mean, I'm sure that, the podcast listener has heard about the stream or either watched the stream themselves. Nowhere in the build up, the headlines, the billboards was Mickey anywhere. And yet when it was all said and done, everybody knew who Mickey was.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, like I said, like the stream would have been so much more boring without Mickey. Even if it had just Durr, Ivey, and G-Man and Gal, like I think just we probably wouldn't have had even like a fraction of the exciting hands that occurred last weekend.
Right. So you picked a couple of hands that Mickey played, right? Now that we've built him up.
Yeah, he's like not even in any of these hands. It's hard for us. I think it would be hard for you and me to like try to do a breakdown of like what Mickey's thinking when he makes a decision in a poker hand. I don't think either of us would do a very good job of being able to break it down.
Yeah, probably not. With all of that said, let's dive into this first hand that you brought. This is Berkey versus Gall, right?
Yes.
You can break it down for the podcast listener. There is a video component to this on YouTube. If you want to check out Tactical Tuesday on YouTube, youtube.com/chasingpokergreatness. Jon, break down the pre-flop action here.
Sure. So they're playing 200, 400, 800 with a big blind ante from our $200 big blind ante. I guess actually the structure says they're playing 200, 200, 400, but Gal is in the $800 straddle. Matt Berkey opens up the button with two queens for $2,000. Krish in the big blind with pocket fives, flats, and Gal also flats from the straddle with ace-6 of clubs. I think everything that happened pre-flop is completely standard.
Agreed. Where, Berkey's got 97K, Gall has 350, and Krish has about 90. So basically starting a little bit more than 100 big blinds deep. Yep. So not ultra deep because of this 4 blind and ante structure. So there's 6.8K in the pot heading to the flop with a bunch more behind. And we get a flop of 8 of clubs, 6 of hearts, deuce of clubs. By the way, podcast listener can't appreciate this, but man, these camera angles on Hustler Live, they're pretty good, huh?
Man,
like, this is just
everything about
good shot.
Hustler Casino Live is just, it's just very, very, very good production wise, I think. And yeah, these camera angles are insane.
Yeah, these are great. So did I say the flop? I can't remember.
Yeah, 8 of clubs, 6 of hearts, deuce of clubs. I think you did say it, but okay. Krish and Gal both checked Matt as expected.
Mm-hmm.
I think Matt firing out a c-bet here makes a lot of sense. He goes big, 5,000 into 6.8. Yeah, I mean, I guess like the first thing to note for me is like Matt's sizing on this flop. Um, it would be, I think, at least in online terms, like this would be a very, very big C bet multi-way in a single raise pot. I would expect like, I don't know, more commonly used size to be closer to like a third or like a much smaller size. I think though that like this is like a deliberate kind of deviation that like Matt makes and maybe like a lot of other live pros make, because I just see like this big size get used a lot as the standard C bet size, even multi-way.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fine. Like, this is how we played for years, you know, in multi-way pots before before we started using the very small sizings. I mean, it like the way that I always thought about multi-way pots for the first, 14 years of my career, 15 years of my career is like you're basically you want to use big sizings and not small sizings. So for like ever, I use exclusively big sizings. But I think that Berkey being in position here, I don't know. I don't really have anything. I think it's just fine, fine given the situation. I would say there's one thing that I just kind of noticed in the replay, and it could mean nothing. It could mean something. I guess like I'll just let both you and the watcher take it into consideration. But Krish, so Berkey bets 5K, and on the video feed you can see Krish grabs a 5K chip, but then for whatever reason instead grabs 5 1K chips to call with instead. And could mean something, could mean nothing. I just find that like for whatever reason humans tend to value their big chips more, and him deliberately switching to 5 1K chips just strikes me as odd.
I'm so scared of like reading into that stuff when I'm actually playing, like and like screwing myself over. But like, yeah, I do agree that I think with you that generally.
Well, look, I mean, just watch when he bets. Like he bets, he goes to grab it, stops himself, instead grabs those. I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
like, but there's something there that happened where like subconsciously he went to grab a 5, realized, oh, I don't want to use this one. I want to use these instead.
Right.
And Berkey, I think people like Berkey, people like G-Man, they're going to pick up on pretty much all of those little bitty things.
Yeah.
Like that's whether it influences their decision, whether it's a data point they prioritize somewhere down the line. I mean, it's extra information that may or may not be used.
Yeah, that's a good point. I did not notice that in the first watch through. Maybe Gal noticed that. Maybe that's why he does what he does right now.
I doubt it. I think. I mean, so Gall, is it Gall or Gal? I thought it was Gall.
Gal? I'm not sure actually.
Wow. Tons of research being done here every week on Tactical Tuesday. I think it's Gall, but
okay,
I'm not sure.
Gall makes more sense, I think.
Yeah. So he check raises to 20K with his pair and his flush draw. I mean, this seems quite reasonable with given the incentives of his hand. He's just basically, trying to realize some fold equity and pretty happy to just like get it in, I would imagine.
Yes, I think like just on the pure equity of your hand, like this is just getting all the money in on the flop is fine. Personally, this is like not how I would prefer to play nut flush draw with a pair. I think I would just be doing a lot of calling and just really just like taking my equity once like it goes bet call on the flop.
But are you taking your equity? Like you're gonna have a pot that's like 20K 3 ways, and you're way more likely to under realize than over realize, I would think.
Yes, I just like can't imagine like folding the turn, like how many situations arise where I fold the turn. It would have to be like a bet from Matt and like a jam or a raise from Krish or something like that.
Yeah. Could be. I mean, you also have a lot of situations, like a lot of good things that could happen too, where, Berkey's got, I like that you call him Matt, by the way. You
oh yeah. Matt. His name is Matt on the thing.
Yeah. It should say Berkey.
It should say Berkey. I agree.
But I mean, Berkey can have like flush draws with overcards, combo draws that he decides to check back. And then if you do complete your flush, it's unlikely that Berkey's going to be playing for like all the bets. If he has like a small flush draw, like 9-10 of clubs, queen jack of clubs, queen 10 of clubs, king queen of clubs, king jack of clubs, king 10 of clubs. I think all those hands are like,
Yeah, I don't love that rationale of like, oh, when we make the really strong hand, but when we make the flush, our opponent's not going to, like when we make the hand where we want to play for all the money, our opponent is not going to want to play for all the money. So our solution is to like try to get all the money in before we make our hand.
Yeah, it's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like a hand like 9-10 of clubs. Like the turn is a 4, it checks through, and now the river's a club.
Yeah.
And Chris checks, Gull bets. Berkey's never raising with his flush on the river.
Right. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying build a pot in case we hit. That's good. Right?
Okay. Yeah, and that's like you're right. It's gonna be, I mean Berkey's never Berkey's never playing a flush draw on the flop, even to this 20K raise. So like, yes, you're definitely stacking Berkey's flush draws when he makes a flush, or when you both make a flush when you take this line versus when you check call. Yeah, fine. It's possible that you don't stack him when he makes a flush. I don't know. I just think that if I was going to raise a hand on the flop, I would like kind of want it to be weaker than ace-6. Middle pair with like nut kicker and ace kicker and the nut flush draw. I don't know. I feel like I would just personally be picking way weaker hands than this to. I don't even know. Is this a bluff? Like, I guess we should first like categorize. Like, is this a bluff? Like, what exactly are we trying to?
I mean, basically, we have a 50% equity hand against most any hand, and we're just raising with our equity. I mean, 3 ways.
Yeah.
Like, Berkey can get it in with worse, and yeah, we can generate folds. I mean, I think part of this is that Berkey bet close to pot on the flop 3 ways,
right,
on a deuce 6-8 board. So I think that like Berkey's naturally has higher equity driven hands when he chooses this sizing 3 ways. Like I would suspect, maybe 8x and maybe some hands like 9-10, 7-9 of hearts. Then all the overpairs and a bunch of flush draws, maybe like 6s or deuces. But I would expect it to be a relatively strong range that c-bets that big 3 ways.
Yes, I agree.
So with that said, I mean, I don't think Gull is under any illusion that Berkey's going to fold an overpair. I think that but Berkey can have worse flush draws, and that's like a really great outcome to get it in with king, queen of clubs.
Okay. All right. I can buy that.
So anyway, Gull does decide to raise. I think you can do either one and like it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Berkey's in a spot now.
Berkey's in a spot, right? So like Berkey's in a spot. And so it's 15 to call. Berkey's got 92K left. There's 36.8K in the middle. He's got 2 red queens. He's in position. What do you think, John?
So I actually really like that this is like roughly 100 big blinds effective. So now I don't have to worry about like, whoa, at 100 big blinds, I would do this. But since they're like 350, I'm not sure. I think now that I say that, it doesn't really make the decision like that much easier. I mean, I guess like what I'm thinking about right now is like the benefits of calling versus the benefits of just jamming. Can
we preface this with something?
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure, but I believe that when this hand went down, Gull is stuck quite a lot.
Yes.
And I think
he got stuck very early on in the session to Mickey, and yeah.
Yeah, he's stuck quite a bit. And by nature, I think Gull is a very aggressive player. And so I think that can have a major influence in Berkey's decision-making or his thought process here too. Like when Gull raises, it's quite easy to imagine that he can be like getting out of line or just raising inappropriately.
Yeah. I agree. I think like out of all the players at this table, like Gull, maybe second to Mickey, is the player that's like most likely to find, raises here that aren't nutted. He's going to have, probably over check raising the spot versus Matt, and I'm sure that Matt knows that.
Right. So with that said, Matt, God, you're getting me. Berkey's at a decision. Call or jam? I'm pretty sure folding is off the table, and
yes.
you lose your job as Tactical Tuesday co-host if we say Berkey folds.
No.
Let's get somebody else in here.
Yeah, someone who doesn't fold over pairs on 8 high flops and single raise flop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like versus a player like Gal who's gonna have like a ton more like kind of like equity driven check raises here. And he's just gonna have like all the 9-7s and the 7-5s and the clubs and maybe even like hands like 9-10 of hearts. I would guess that like jamming versus those players makes more sense versus jamming against like a player like me, let's say, that like doesn't have all those as many like equity driven check raises, and like a lot of my bluff check raises are going to be hands that I am very comfortable just like snap folding to a jam. So I'm going to have some
you're
like
saying you're polarizing with
right. And Gal is just less polar. He's going to have hands that actually kind of have a little bit of a decision facing a 93K jam from Berkey, and is going to actually have to think about folding for 70K more.
Yeah. I mean, it could go either way. I think Berkey can jam or Berkey can call. My typical tendency is to call in spots like this. However, if, Berkey knows Gall's stuck and just ready to gamble, then, with like a hand like 9-7 of hearts or 5-7 of hearts, something like that, then like just getting it in and being like, let's roll.
Yeah.
Maybe the best, more profitable option.
Right.
So Berkey does choose door number 2. He just gets it in.
Does Krish being behind Berkey, like let's say you're Berkey, and does Krish being behind you and flatting the 5K, like are you just totally disregarding that? Like,
so I guess this kind of goes back to that data point earlier.
Yep.
Of like the major question here that Berkey's got to take into account is like, is Krish slow playing? Like, does Krish have traps in his range? Because if Krish has traps in his range, then that makes the decision to jam much more dicey.
Yeah.
I would like, again, it's a very small thing, but that little deliberation, choosing the 5 1K chips. I mean, if Berkey's aware of that and saw that, I would say that eliminates a lot of Krish's traps from his range.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't really have to worry so much about that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it could just be a hesitation, even if he didn't pick up on like exactly why he hesitated, but like that small like hitch.
Yeah. Makes it way easier to jam here, or like makes it way more comfortable to jam here than,
Yeah. When you think the big blind just doesn't have like a set of 8s here.
Yeah.
Then it makes the decision a lot better.
Yeah.
Or a lot easier to make.
Yeah. I feel like this opens up like a big potential conversation about having to protect your calling range from the big blind multi-way in these spots and not just check raising all your sets and 2-pair and stuff. But we should probably leave that for another day.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Where somehow we thought this hand was going to be quick, and it's actually gone 19 minutes or so. But it's quite an interesting spot on the flop, and
I think both Gal and Matt have this, like, it's neither of the decisions that they made or ended up making are super standard decisions. So,
and if you are Krish here and you do have a set of 8s, like knowing that Gall is stuck, knowing that a check raise is not the least likely thing that's ever going to happen here, flatting with sets or trapping with sets seems like a pretty appealing possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, if he would have done it here, it would have worked out incredibly well for him.
Yeah.
Like he would have got all in 3 ways with like a set, but unfortunately he doesn't have a set. He's just got a pair of 5s. So, doesn't really matter very much, but, so
we should play this through and show the result to
we'll play it through. So Berkey jams, Gall takes a moment to look at the pot odds and just double check to make sure before he calls 70K that he's getting the right price, which at 2-1, he's getting the right price for sure. And they run it twice, and Berkey fades all the outs twice and scoops it.
Yep.
We can see both boards Berkey plus 108K. Good to be the Berkster. One for solve for Y.
Yeah.
And after the break, going to be G-Man time and Tom Dwan time, breaking down a hand that those two legends of the game.
Matchup for the ages.
Matchup for the ages. Stick around.
In a world where a fish donk bets the flop, and you don't know what to do, one man,
Coach Brad Wilson,
has a surefire plan to neutralize flop leads and rip that dunk to shreds. Nuffle. Available now. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/Nuffle. Rated R.
All right. Welcome back after the break. We're going to dive right into hand number 2. We see one Tom Dwan, who's been over in Asia for the last decade or so, playing in Macau, rocking his Poker King shirt, looking down at 2 jacks from under the gun. I assume there's no straddle on.
There's no straddle this hand, yeah.
Yeah, no straddle. So 2-4. He opens 3x, and Garrett decides to call.
That's
surprising.
Yeah, sorry.
It is surprising. And Tom has jacks, and Garrett has ace queen of diamonds. For the podcast listener, I would say, that this is just one of those situations that happen in poker where Garrett's deviating based on the table configuration that he's playing at. He's not 3-betting the under the gun raiser Tom Dwan. Got a couple of players behind, like Lucky's in the small blind, who can flat. I think that's a good situation for Garrett if Lucky flats out of the small blind, playing a multi-way pot. So to me, it's just he doesn't want to isolate himself against Tom Dwan, who's opening under the gun. So he widens his flat range, contracts his 3-betting range to invite some players in behind. I think, this is just it's one of the reasons that makes Garrett such a versatile, adaptable, strong, and good poker player. Something that, like, I personally think lots of players make mistakes by not deviating too heavily from their pre-flop strategies. And it heartens me to know that Garrett is very willing to deviate quite heavily.
Yeah. So I'm all for deviating with, just to clarify, I think the point that you were trying to make, it's behind Garrett, there's Krish and Lucky. Both of them are recreational players. They don't play poker for a living. And so are going to be considerably, weaker players than for example, Tom Dwan. And so inviting those guys,
most people are.
Yeah. Maybe even if they weren't recreational, Yeah. So inviting them in to the pot and, again, like Brad said, not isolating yourself versus Tom and playing a 3-bet pot where you probably don't have much edge, if any edge versus Tom. Why not just let 2 weaker players in where now suddenly there's the potential for someone to make huge mistakes post flop and maybe even pre-flop. That being said, I'm all for doing everything that Brad said and just widening your calling range, trimming down your 3-bet range. Ace queen of diamonds is wide for not 3-betting for me. I'm talking about 10-8 suited and jack 9 suited. Ace queen of diamonds for me would still be I think would still be a 3-bet.
Let's talk about this, because ace queen of diamonds, right? So it has a value. It has a value in EV when he 3-bets Tom Dwan, which will make money. Mm-hmm. Just no way to slice it or dice it. That 3-bet versus Tom's open just has to make money with ace queen of diamonds.
Yes.
So to ask a better question is, can you make more money when Lucky or Krish comes along and we play a pot 3 ways? Right. That's the comparison here. And to be frank, there's no way to measure it. There's no way to actively know which one is better. Mm-hmm. So basically, Garrett's just going with his gut instinct that flatting is more profitable than 3-betting. And I don't know. I trust Garrett. Yeah. In Garrett, I trust in situations like this, because this is the environment that he's played in the last 5 to 10 years. And he's obviously one of the best players in the world. So
Yeah. And I'm sure he has like for this exact specific situation, like he knows the mood that Krish is in. He knows the mood that Lucky is in, like way better than we do. Like, you've mentioned this on previous podcasts. Sometimes you get a feeling for like when someone is just about to like blast off, despite, maybe physically not appearing like they're massively tilted or something like that. So like, yeah, if Garrett's picked up on anything like that from the players behind him, then yeah, I guess like
I don't
is probably way more profitable. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think the more I've learned about stuff like that, somebody going off like a rocket in a spot where like nothing's like really happened, but you can just like feel that they're about to do something ridiculous and just punt their stack away. To me, I think it's becoming less mysterious the more that I learn about body language and nonverbal communication. Maybe it's just something that like you can sense in another human being that like for whatever reason their posture changes, the way they're touching their cards change. They're ready to battle. They've waited too long. Now it's time to play a big pot. But I mean, this is like, I think that if you play live poker, you should have a good understanding of when to deviate from your baseline strategy. And I trust that Garrett knows when to do that. And it's not like he even thought about it. He just did this very quickly, which to me is like, that makes it seem like it's even more of a slam dunk. Like this is just, he knows what to do here and he's doing it.
Right.
But we don't have to dwell on the pre-flop for, we still got interesting stuff.
We talked about an open and a flat for 5 minutes pre-flop. And that's Tactical Tuesday.
That's Tactical Tuesday. So and nothing even happens, by the way. Nobody like 3-bets. Nobody joins in. It's just heads up between Garrett and Mr. Dwan. So we get a pretty good flop for both players, actually.
Yeah.
There's, by the way, we didn't mention the stacks, but Tom's got 224K and looks like Garrett's got all the money. Tom covered by almost 2x at this point. So
they're playing like 500 big blinds effective.
Yeah, so effective stacks are, 224K. There's 3.4K in the middle. The flop is Jack of Diamonds, 10 of Clubs, 4 of Hearts. Tom starts out with a check. Any thoughts here, John?
I'm a big fan of this check. I am, just to simplify my out of position strategy in single raise pots, I generally check range. And so I think, especially even like, I think there's some boards where like it would be okay not to check range. Some like, ace king or like ace king, just those very high card boards where you're going to have a significant range advantage versus a player that just flatted in position. I think on this type of flop, these like low and middling type flops, that's not going to be the case. So I think checking range here, which it appears that's what Tom is doing, is my preferred strategy.
It appears. We can't know.
Yeah.
But he is checking with top set.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe doesn't check with tens. Again, it's hard to know. Garrett here with his backdoor flush draw, his gut shot, his ace high.
2 overs, yeah.
2 overs. He decides to stab. Looks to be 1.5K. Any thoughts on Garrett's stab here?
So it's a little bit tough for me to comment on this spot because I don't, like I said pre-flop, I don't do a lot of flatting with ace queen of diamonds or a lot of like ace highs in position, or good ace highs in position. My kind of initial feeling when I see this spot in this hand is that I would likely be checking back ace queen quite frequently. It has like, I mean, I guess it's certainly strong enough to call a check raise, especially with the backdoor diamonds. But just, you're going to have the best hand a decent amount of the time. When you bet and your opponent folds, you're going to be folding out worse hands almost always. I can't imagine a better hand than ace queen folding the flop. If this bet is just, Garrett's just putting this bet out to set up future barrels to try to fold out, like a 10 or hand like pocket nines or something like that, then I think it's considerably more understandable. But just my gut instinct would be that I would check back ace queen in position.
I think it could go either way.
Yeah.
I think starting out with a bet is fine. I think checking back is totally fine. Garrett wants to start out with a bet. I mean, it could be, like you said, structuring future strategies, thinking that like it's tough for Tom to call 3 barrels, just maybe more difficult to play after checking back or whatever it is, but Garrett decides to bet. But I think it I don't think either one is greatly preferred over the other. Because like you said, ace queen high is just the best hand quite often against Tom here.
Right.
So Garrett does decide to bet 1.5K. And Tom, any thoughts here on Tom's decision, check raise, flat?
This would be a check raise for me. I was surprised to see Tom flat here. I don't know if he's maybe playing a strategy where he just plays no check raises out of position in single raise spots on these types of boards, or maybe for some other reason he doesn't want to play check raises. But given that I'm checking range out of position, I'm going to have a lot of strong hands, a lot of strong made hands, like top set. Like in Tom's example, I'm going to have a decent number of hands that do want to bluff. For example, I'm just going to have all the open enders, all the gut shots, tons of stuff with backdoor flush draws that I think do want to bluff. So I would be check raising top set here pretty much pure.
I don't mind check calling. I think getting to the turn with some traps is good. And I think jacks is the most obvious trap because hard for Garrett to have a good hand when you have top set here. Plus, Garrett is an aggressive player. So Garrett can fire multiple bets and we can trap multiple bets from lower equity hands. So I think my preference here would be to check raise with tens or
tens and fours.
Tens and fours, but not jacks. I think check calling with jacks is just totally fine.
Okay.
And Tom, goes for it. So puts in the call and we get a pretty good turn for Garrett. The king of spades. So Garrett turns Broadway and Tom has his set of jacks. Tom, after check calling the flop, decides to check the turn. Very reasonable. And now Garrett, with a hand that is pretty hard to believe that he has because of the pre-flop action, decides to bet 5K. What are your thoughts here, on the turn? Tom's decision, Garrett's decision is pretty obvious here. He just goes polar, bets 5 and 6.5K. Tom has the option to raise, has the option to call.
I think once we've started the flop with just the check call, I just check calling down until the river and then doing whatever aggressive action that you might want to do with pocket jack with a set on the river. I think one thing that I didn't think about that you mentioned that I think is really good is that Garrett is just a super aggressive player. He's not going to be afraid to just bomb 3 streets. So when you have a hand that can very comfortably trap and call down, Garrett is probably one of the best players to do that against. And that's what I would continue doing on the turn is just check calling down with jacks.
Yeah. So Garrett's going polar too, right?
Yeah.
And on this board going polar, Tom has to think maybe queen 9 suited, is in the value range, probably discounting ace queen pretty heavily. And then king 10 is the only other value. I guess there's pocket 4s.
Yeah, you could have, I think he could have pocket 10s and 4s if he has ace queen, right?
He can. I think though that it's very hard for Tom to find bluffs calling check calling flop and then check raising turn because Tom has ace queen in his range, right?
Yeah.
This would be I don't think Tom has many bluffs, and I think that check calling is pretty much what he's forced to do here on the turn.
Yep.
So Tom goes ahead and check calls, and then in the epic battle of these high stakes heavyweights, it's a back and forth. The river is a jack. So we have the last remaining jack. Mr. Dwan has his quads, and Garrett is just kind of sad now. He doesn't know he's sad.
He doesn't know he's sad, but he's sad.
Yeah, he doesn't know he's sad. Look at the face. He seems happy on the inside, but he's about to be very sad on the inside in a few moments. Tom checks again. Looks like he actually considers betting here.
Yeah.
And I don't think betting is the worst, to be honest, because when Garrett polarizes on the turn, the player most likely to have a jack is Tom. And so if Garrett decides to, if Garrett has king 10, then he is not betting. If he decides to bet polar on the turn, polarize on the turn with king queen, I don't think he's value betting this river. So with Garrett's like bluff catcher type hands, he's just going to check behind.
Yeah.
I would imagine quite frequently.
Yeah.
So I think Tom does deliberate in going for a lead on the river. I don't mind a lead on the river, to be honest. I think that if you did lead something like 5K, you could set yourself up for like a bet 3-bet situation. Although hard to find bluffs in our bet 3-bet range.
I mean, like, I think it's hard to find bluffs in your river lead range even.
It is. I just like, I mean, it's hard because of the way that Tom's played this hand. It's hard to find bluffs like no matter what he does, I think, which is sort of problematic and plays out a little bit in this hand. So Tom checks the river. He doesn't lead. Garrett, we watched this. I actually didn't see this hand live. Jon brought it to me. Predicted Garrett's bet on the river.
Yeah, on the nose.
On the nose, 25K. I think the overbet makes sense. He polarizes on the turn and knows that he doesn't have tons of value on the river, so he wants to go big and polarize on the river as well. So Garrett makes himself a wager of $5,000 chips, and Tom thinks about it for quite a bit. He uses a time chip, actually, and I actually don't think that he's deliberating. I mean, I think that he is deliberating. I think that he is thinking about the size that he should check raise to here, because it's quite a strange decision. You're sitting here with quads, and now your villain has gone polar and then overbet polar on the river. So, like, what size do you choose with your check raise?
It's the ultra rare situation where you have the nuts and your opponent has overbet, and you're like, "Wow, this is great," and then the next second you're like, "Oh wait, what
do I
size
do?
do I check raise to when I have the nuts?"
What size? Right. And Tom thinks about it and eventually cuts out. What does he cut out? Trying to fast forward.
68K, I believe.
68K. So misses Kevin Malone's favorite number by 1K. Got to go for the 69K there, Tom. Come on, you're so
Maybe
close.
He didn't have a green chip.
What do you think about Tom's check raise sizing here?
I mean, just based off the fact that of the conversation that we had, that like, look, Tom, once he check calls the flop, check calls the turn, it just doesn't have any bluffs or very many bluffs. I can't think of a single one that would play this way, honestly. I think that being the case, I do like the small check raise size, just in spots where you're not going to have lots of bluffs, or any bluffs that I can think of. This was, check raising small or raising small is generally my preferred strategy. I don't know if something like that is like, I just don't know how something like that gets perceived in live poker and by like G-Man specifically here. Like, will we look at the small check raise size and be like, oh, well, like he's never bluffing for that size, so I'm always just going to fold. And like maybe he calls slightly more frequently versus the check jam size, for example, thinking that like you actually do have some bluffs. Or is, Garrett or a live poker player is the type to look at this check raise and be like, okay, well, he has to pick that size even with his bluffs because he doesn't have very many bluffs. Therefore, I have to call like at least some of the time when they pick this very small check raise size.
I'm of two minds.
Yeah.
I think actually I'm kind of one mind. My preference is just for Tom to jam.
Okay.
Like, I think it's a weird thing where he's out of position on the river, and like when Garrett chooses the overbet sizing, Tom can make it a 2-bet game or a 3-bet game. So like he can raise where Garrett still has the option to re-raise.
Mm-hmm.
I think like once Garrett overbets and polarizes on the river, like when you repolar, you're typically choosing a big size, right? Because like when villain has, I guess you can choose a small size when Garrett polarizes too.
Right. Once like Garrett has
generates a bunch of folds.
Yeah, once Garrett has already polarized, like any raise by you is like to any side. Even if he min clicked it, it would be like that's polar.
Yeah, I mean it's tricky. It is tricky, and yeah, I mean maybe Tom's sizing here is just really good. maybe I changed my mind now that I've thought about it more. It's always hard for me to. I mean, it's always hard for me to I guess, overly criticize somebody like Dwan
Yeah.
or like Garrett. Like I struggle, right? Because I mean, this is a very interesting spot, and I have to imagine that Tom is used to spots like this, check raising at depth, out of position, and yeah, I think probably fundamentally, technically, when you repolar, you want to use a smaller sizing here.
I mean, like if I could ask Tom any question, like a question, and like just inject truth serum into him, like my question in this spot would be like, okay, if you had a bluff, like with your bluffs, like what size do you raise here? And like I think that would say a lot about like what he thinks about the spot and like his strategy. Like if he jams his bluffs, but he goes this size with his quads, then like I think that reveals a lot.
I mean, basically for him to be bluffing, he needs to have a jack.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be turning a jack into a bluff, which is not that insane versus, you know, polar turn over bet river. I think like, I don't know, a hand like queen jack probably like is one that comes to mind as like, okay, that would probably be like the first candidate that I would start thinking about turning into a bluff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, like versus Garrett's overbet, he's basically saying a jack is not going to cut it on the river. So
yeah, I mean, we say that, right? But like we did say that Garrett polarized too. So like,
sure.
If he's polarizing, then he should have some bluffs.
Well, it's not gonna like you can't just look down at ace jack, I'm saying, and expect to beat Garrett's value range when it goes
maybe
overbet. Really? You think he's saying he would bet like queen jack for the size on the river? I don't know.
No, like 7-9. I mean,
oh yeah, you beat bluffs. I'm just saying that you don't beat any value.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, you beat the bluffs, right? Like that's all you basically. So those are the factors, right? Like how often is Garrett bluffing? Does he think that Garrett has like equal distribution of like bluffs and value? And if he thinks that Garrett's under bluffing here with this polar size, then you turn your jack into a bluff, right? So like that's the sequence that you have to think in your mind and then execute at the tables of like, okay, I think Garrett's under bluffing here. And because I think Garrett's under bluffing, then I'm going to turn my jack into a bluff. And it's a hard sequence to come to, honestly, like, because Garrett is so aggressive that like you can probably justify just calling with a jack. Like ace jack is pretty easy to call with, I think.
I can't count the number of times I've like been in this situation, looked down at a jack in my hand and just jammed thinking like, okay, well, I'm just going to be safe and try to get them to fold everything. Like, unless he has king jack, I don't think he can call. Like if I rip, you know, the rest of my stack in here with queen jack. So yeah, I'll admit that thought has definitely crossed my mind.
I mean, maybe a better hand is like king queen, right? Like,
yeah, maybe.
You can have a jack, you can have king queen. Yeah. I think you need a king or a jack pretty much, because you certainly don't want to be, you want to raise into the nuts as least often as you can, ideally, just in a poker sense. So, all right, I've come around. Initially, I thought it was a jam, but now my mind has been changed by both you and Tom Dwan. So I'm on board. Doesn't matter what you guys do, by the way, because G-Man, he's going to think about it for quite a bit. He uses many, many time chips.
He's just too good, man, on these river spots. He's too good.
Oh, we got
man.
Nurtec. We have the Nurtec ad. Sorry,
this in the middle.
This goes in the final version because I'm not editing this out. We've come too far. We're past the point of no return. Nurtec does not sponsor this podcast, but you got an ad in there sneakily. Man, I don't know how their time chips work, but like they work for a while.
I think it's a minute per chip or something like that. But yeah,
there it is.
Garrett does make the good fold.
Yeah, he does make the fold. Well done, G-Man. I mean, that's why you get paid the big bucks outside of these two streams, but you'll be back, I'm sure, for all the future streams. And you know, the funny part about these streams, by the way, as we close down, is like it's such a small sample. It's like 2 sessions, right, of like 300 hands or so. And in that limited amount of hands,
not like even 300 hands.
Well, I mean, they're going to play like 12 hours.
Oh, in 2 hours, and 2 sessions total. Yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking about per day. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, they get like 400 hands total. And right, I mean, the variance in that small of a sample size is just really, really big.
Yeah.
Garrett ended up getting buried. But I mean, again, that shit happens over 400 hands.
Oh. Did he overall? I thought he did okay like one day and not too well the other day. But
I think he got buried overall.
Oh, jeez.
In both days. And I think like this is the downside of playing live poker professionally is like you don't get a ton of these really big games. You got to capitalize when they go, right? It's like very imperative that some shit goes well. I'm sure there's lots of aspiring high stakes pros who have been on the other end where they take a shot in a really good spot and it just does not go their way. And then, it just whacks them for maybe a year, maybe a couple of years.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like I am like not at the point where I can imagine like, 80% of my annual income coming from like 4 sessions or something like that. Like that would just be so stressful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. But great hands selection this week, Jon. More live poker, apparently. Let's ask the Tactical Tuesday audience if you want more live poker. We can bring you more live poker. And with that said, thank you for watching today's episode. And anything else you got?
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.